The shoot was completed, and back in London, Terry Jones began to edit the film in preparation for Life of Brian's scheduled release a few months later. But unbeknownst to the Pythons, the secret was already out. There was a traitor within the ranks. Someone had sent 11 pages of the script to Mary Whitehouse and the Festival of Light.
The nationwide Festival of Light obtained the script from somewhere. I've no knowledge of that. That was all a bit before my time. But nevertheless, the fact that they got the script means that somebody must have sent it to them that was associated with the film.
Alarm bells are ringing at the Festival of Light. Somehow or other, they've got hold of 11 pages of script. It's actually the scene with the leper and so on. And they obviously don't like what they read. But they realise that if they go for this in a big way, then that may be counterproductive. So what they do is they adopt this kind of low-profile, somewhat insidious campaign of saying, oh, let's all pray for the failure of Life of Brian.
But praying was just the start of it. The Festival of Light then wrote a letter to the British Board of Film Censors, urging them to think of the consequences of allowing Life of Brian to be shown. It ended, "I need not remind you of the wider implications of scurrilous abuse of God, Christ, or the Bible." The British Board of Film Censors, in turn, would not give the film a certificate unless they were confident that the film could not be successfully prosecuted for blasphemy. So the Pythons offered to take the film to John Mortimer for legal advice.
They came to see me and I saw the film, which I thought riotously funny, and it remains one of my favourite funny films.
Arms for an ex-leper!
It was one rather dangerous point where Michael Palin was a leper and he was cured by Jesus. And he said he was very angry. He said, "Oh, bloody do-gooder, cured me. I can't beg anymore because I'm not a leper anymore." I think the opinion did recognise that it was dangerous, particularly dangerous in the aftermath of the Gay News trial. There obviously were points which a prosecutor would make much of, but our advice about the whole film was really founded on telling the court that Brian and Jesus were two different people, and that Jesus appears in the film as a separate character.
Some of the censorship was done by the Pythons themselves, most significantly scenes involving a character called Otto.
Hey, leader! What? Oh, I'm so sorry. Have you seen the new leader? The what? The new leader. I wish to find him and hail him.
Otto's like a prototype fascist, really. I mean, his view of religion is he wants to purify his religion and get rid of the foreigners.
In one particular scene, Otto talked to Brian about setting up a racially pure, all-Jewish community.
Making it pure! No foreigners, no riffraff, no gypsies!
It is terribly contentious because it's sort of suggesting that in extremes, Zionism can be compared to Nazism. And this rather extreme criticism was exacerbated by Gilliam taking the motto of the Star of David and making it into a sort of Nazi swastika, which immediately is very, very in your face.
It's right on the edge. Again, you're saying things you're not supposed to say, this time not about Christians, but about Jews in Israel. Important stuff to say, because it's sort of cutting through the hypocrisy, and it's saying the words you're not supposed to say.
Also, Otto rather held up the action. So it was actually Eric Idle himself who decided that Otto, the Nazi Jew, would go.
Though it was, in many ways sad, it was still not really what the film was about. It's a different film.
I'm still not convinced cutting it out was the right thing, because I think that scene's really important.
The only remnant in the finished film is Otto's very brief appearance with his Suicide Squad at Brian's crucifixion.
Suicide Squad! Attack! That showed him, huh?
Plans were also underway to publish the book of the film, but that too could be subject to a prosecution for blasphemy.
The Pythons wanted again to publish a book based on the film. And I read the script and I thought it was absolutely marvellous. I thought this is really the Pythons' masterpiece. It's a wonderful combination of satirical humour, crazy humour, and serious metaphysical humour.
Some cuts were suggested that would ensure safe publication. The Pythons considered them, and Michael Palin called Geoffrey Strawn at Methuen.
The answer came back to me in the most civil possible way from Michael Palin, who gave me a ring. He said, look, we've talked about it. We don't want to make any changes. We don't think that this film is offensive to any living individual. We stand by it. And that's our last word. So I went to my chairman, the chairman of Methuen, and to the boss of Associated Book Publishers, and I said, look, I think this is a wonderful film. I don't think it's in any way unpleasant or offensive. This is the Pythons' decision. We cannot cave in to Mary Whitehouse. So they said, OK, go ahead. The only proviso was that if somebody had to go to prison, it would be me. So I agreed to that.
For he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow.
Life of Brian was completed. The Pythons set out for America. It had been decided to open the film there first, home as it was to freedom of speech, the Constitution, and perhaps even more helpfully, not home to any blasphemy laws. The world premiere was set for New York on August the 17th, 1979. The reviews were positive for the most part.
People were kind of, whoa, not a bad way, but just they were kind of surprised, impressed at the audacity of the film to go there and to try this kind of stuff.
And some of them were even delivered in keeping with the film itself.
Ye who wouldst not see the Bible satirized, stay thee at home. And ye who would smile at biblical buffoonery, hie thee hence to a theater nearest you. Just knowest beforehand what thou art getting into. Therefore sayeth not that thou were not warned, and others will be saved from your gripes of wrath.
And the first gripes of wrath came from probably the least expected place, when Rabbi Abraham Hecht described the film as being blasphemous, sacrilegious, and an incitement to possible violence.
Well, it seemed odd when the film came out that the first group to complain about it was a group that we'd never imagined would want to have anything to complain about at all. And that was I think it was the New York Association of Rabbis. And we thought, well, why are they complaining? I can imagine Christians complaining, but not rabbis. And anyway, they were complaining about the use of the prayer shawl in the stoning sequence, which we didn't know it was the prayer shawl. We just thought it was a bit of costume, So evidently we were making light of that. So when you're treading on delicate ground, you never know what you're going to be, who you're going to be offending.
In a rare piece of church unity, religious groups banded together to protest about Life of Brian. Here in Variety magazine.
One of my proudest moments is the entire page devoted to Life of Brian. 2 columns, the Protestants protesting, 2 columns, the Catholics protesting, 2 columns, the Jews protesting. That was fantastic. I thought we really hit everybody quite evenly.
The religious community began to wage war on Brian. Demonstrations were hastily organized.
Well, there were going to be riots. They actually were saying people were going to be killing each other, rioting. Yeah. I just knew it was going to be fun. And it was. They didn't let us down. They were out there parading, marching, screaming, and shouting, just like one would expect.
I don't remember any anxiety at all when they started protesting. I remember just thinking, and you've got to remember that we were not strangers to protest and disapproval. Almost everything I've done in my life at some point or another has been disapproved of or protested against by someone.
One of the biggest demonstrations was by an organization called Citizens Against Blasphemy in New York, headed by the Reverend Roger Fulton.
A group of rabbis and priests held demonstrations over this past weekend, and they were demonstrating against a movie called The Life of Brian. About 250 people gathered in front of the Warner Brothers offices.
Whenever something comes out that at all touches on religion, there's a certain segment of people who are going to be kind of get that Home Alone look on their face, and they're going to be horrified that this is happening. And to me, it doesn't mean the film is good or the film is bad. It just means that when a film like this comes out, people likely, without even seeing it, are going to be offended by it, upset by it, going to feel the need to demonstrate.
Well, you've got to remember that Christianity in America is mainly about sex. They're so deeply uncomfortable about every aspect of sex that they don't much care about wars or destroying the environment or financial corruption. But anything to do with sex sets them off.
Life of Brian was now a news story. Michael, Graham and Terry Jones were invited to appear on NBC's The Tomorrow Show to talk about the diverse reactions to the film.
Did you set out to get the Bible? To really stick the Bible?
Got it, haven't you, Graham?
Not with me, no.
No.
I don't think we did. Not to get the Bible. I mean, there are bits of the Bible I don't like.
Were you anticipating the challenge to what you will call satire or lampooning that would come from religious organizations?
Yeah, I think we expected to get quite a lot of reaction from religious organisations. Well, not from religious organisations, but we thought there would be a comeback from people.
Yeah. What surprises have you had since the picture was released in terms of the reaction you've gotten? Did you expect that what has happened was going to happen?
I don't know. Of course not. I mean, I just...
Helps to sell tickets.
You never know. I mean, I certainly didn't expect to hear people say that this film might be an incitement to violence. I mean, that was a surprise when I heard that.
That's a very silly thing to say as well, I think.
It's a dangerous thing to say.
And let it be said for the record, gang, this is a funny movie. It's hysterically funny. And why people get upset about it is because I think possibly they see it from, as somebody here said, from their vantage point rather than from the satirical vantage point.
The US protests and marches only served to heighten media profile and increase demand. The original plan to open Brian on 200 screens nationwide snowballed to nearer 600. Certain states banned the film, especially in the Bible Belt, which only fanned the flames more. Back in the UK, word about Life of Brian was spreading, and although the film wouldn't be on general release until the following year, on November the 9th, 1979, John Cleese and Michael Palin were invited to appear on a late-night BBC Two discussion programme hosted by Tim Rice to debate the film in the presence of Mervyn Stockwood, the Bishop of Southwark, and Malcolm Muggeridge, born-again Christian, figurehead of the Festival of Light, and well-known friend of Mary Whitehouse. The stage was set for one of TV's all-time great ding-dongs.
There was obviously going to be quite a heavy interview, perhaps the strongest criticism we would face. And John and I remember actually sort of mugging up for it, like for an exam, going through my books and, sort of getting all the arguments together.
When I look at that figure, I mean, I know you're going to say Brian isn't Jesus, but I mean, that's just rubbish. The whole thing is quite clearly, if no Jesus had lived, that film wouldn't have been produced.
And the bishop sitting there in all of his purple with the world's biggest silver crucifix. I've never seen one so big, fingering it. And the voices were all headmasters' voices, and they were all dignified.
It's quite humbug to say that this is not a ridiculing of the founder of the Christian religion and of the incarnation in an extremely cheap and tenth-rate way.
Muggeridge, until he was 60, was a well-known womanizer and drinker. And I suspect to some extent he only got religion after he couldn't do anything else. And Mervyn Stockwood was a homosexual, as everybody knew, and also, as it happens, a heavy drinker.
As it went on, an extraordinary thing happened, was that we were the ones with the serious points, and they were the ones who were playing to the crowd.
I simply don't think it was worthy of you. It was the sort of thing, as I say, that at Cambridge the footlights did on a damp Tuesday afternoon. Or the lower fourth when I was a schoolmaster.
You keep making the basic assumption that we are ridiculing Christ and Christ's teaching, and I say that we are not.
But do you imagine that your scene, for instance, of the Sermon on the Mount, the scene in your film of the Sermon on the Mount, is not ridiculing one of the most sublime utterances that any human being has ever spoken on this earth? Of course it is.
No, it's
Absolutely
making fun of the guy who's remembered it wrong and of the people who don't understand it and miss the point.
Well, I think
that's really unfair, because I think that a lot of people looking in will think that we have actually ridiculed Christ physically. Christ is played by an actor, Ken Colley. He speaks the words from the Sermon on the Mount. He's treated absolutely respectfully. The camera then pans away. We go right to the back of the crowd to someone who shouts, "Speak up," because they cannot hear him. Now, I mean, if that utterly, undermines one's faith in Christ, then I think a faith cannot be terribly strong.
I started off by saying that this is such a 10th-rate film that I don't believe that it would disturb
Yes, I know you
anybody's
started with an open
faith.
mind, I realise that.
I'd never been so sort of angry in public before, I don't think. It was just the way they dealt with it, the sort of venom used just because they liked the sound of the words.
I was aware Michael was steaming, but I was kind of enjoying it because they annoyed me. And I reckoned that we were nailing them. I thought we were winning.
As the debate built to a climax, Muggeridge saw red.
All you've done is to make a lot of people on a cross singing a music hall song. It's so disgusting when you think of it.
A lot of people go away very happy, laughing at that, their faith not touched one jot.
I don't think it'll
really
touch
do.
their faith.
I don't think it will.
I had quotes in my pocket from Malcolm that absolutely validated our position and destroyed his own. And out of kindness, I didn't pull them out and read them out because I was feeling kind of sorry for him. Isn't that unbelievable?
You have succeeded in reducing something which has inspired the greatest art into something which is presented in terms of the lowest art. That's your feat. That's your
set up your own terms that we have to influence people. We're not saying we want to influence people. We're trying to make them laugh, make them happy. I mean, that's something that helps.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to call a halt. I'm very
sorry. And just as it was being wound up, Mervyn the bishop delivered his pièce de résistance.
Well, you'll get your 30 pieces. You'll get your 30 pieces of silver. But I'm quite sure.
I hasten to add.
For those of you who didn't attend Sunday school, this is a biblical quote and refers to the money that Judas was paid to betray Jesus Christ.
I knew then that we'd won, not because we'd been asked to give our arguments, not because we'd, mugged up and knew what to say, but because they had made, to be honest, fools of themselves.
Somebody said afterwards, you won because you behaved much better than the Christians.
But I came off shaking, really. And the Bishop Stockwood came up to me and said, "Oh, seemed to go pretty well." And I realised for them it was a game. They were taking it far less seriously than we were. He had a couple of whiskies and off he went.
Days later, the television show Not the 9 O'Clock News would send up the whole encounter, effectively turning the tables, with Rowan Atkinson as a bishop who had made a film based on the life of John Cleese.
I mean, I actually find it deeply offensive that in a country that is still ostensibly a Python-worshipping country, that a 14-year-old child can actually get in to see this film. I mean, there is little enough proper Python around these days without parading this distorted garbage about.
Bishop, you directed the film. Did you expect this kind of reaction?
Well, I certainly didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition.
In the UK, the British Board of Film Censors passed Life of Brian uncut with a AA certificate, meaning that anyone over the age of 14 could see it. This despite the lobbying from the Festival of Light, who had pushed for an outright ban.